I'm Rick Albert, and welcome to The Key to the City of Angels, the podcast where we unlock the secrets of Los Angeles real estate. With over 300 real estate deals under my belt, I've seen it all, from house hacking strategies that build wealth to helping clients close multi-million-dollar deals in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Every week, I'll bring you expert insights, market trends, and inspiring success stories to help you navigate the LA real estate scene. Whether you're a first-time buyer, an investor, or just curious about what it takes to thrive in the City of Angels, this podcast is your guide to making smarter decisions and achieving your goals. So grab your keys. It's time to unlock your path to prosperity in Los Angeles real estate. Hello, everyone. Rick Albert here with the Keys to the City of Angels. Today, I have Hana Cha here. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about what you do and actually how you got into it?
Well, thanks for having me on your show, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I feel like because that's the same question I get asked so many times. Real estate for me I fell into it happenstance. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, kind of amongst the right people. That gave me an opportunity to get into this industry that I knew nothing about when I was 23 years old. And so, I think for me at the time, it was interesting and intriguing. And it was because I knew nothing about it. It was like, wow, I wonder why they want me to somehow, work with them or be a part of this when I have zero experience and I know nothing. But, I think for me at that time, it was a challenging opportunity that was aspirational. And I think I've always been a curious person, kind of seeking challenges and looking for opportunities to learn more, do better, be better. And so it was that. And I think as soon as I got my feet wet, I was like, just like we were talking about, this is a fascinating business. Things are constantly changing, always evolving. And, to really kind of stay on top of things, onus is really on you. It's you really reap what you sow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. People ask me, what do I love most about real estate? It's like you get to exercise both sides of the brain,
Exactly.
Right? Analytical and the creative side.
Yeah.
'Cause I was in the same boat as you. I was 22 years old and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so then I met my now mentor and actually my now broker. Mm-hmm. And I saw what he had been doing over the years in real estate. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, I'll jump in, give it a shot. And I was like, and here I am since.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah. And then tell me about what your organization does.
So the core kind of service offering of my company is a development, marketing, and sales consulting service. I come from sales. So I spent the first 5 years of my life in my real estate life, selling condos in mid-Wilshire and greater Los Angeles area, working for a developer. And then over time, when the agency, which I'm sure you've heard of and all of your listeners will have heard of, when the agency started in 2011, I joined forces with Billy and Mauricio at the time because they wanted to create and launch a new development platform, in line with their brokerage. And so I transitioned from being on a sales floor to really building out the new development platform. My focus was new business, managing sales teams, and really getting in the weeds with marketing strategy and execution. And because you come from the space, you understand that every building in each neighborhood is so different. And it has its own nuances, its pros and cons, different team dynamics, different budgets, different timelines, different price points. And so I think over kind of going through all of that and really learning more about this business, just outside of sales, like you said, I think it's this industry where we have to be running with our left brain, but know when to plug the creative when thinking outside of the box components in. And so When I eventually decided to leave the agency a few years ago and start my own business, I was not a fan of the traditional brokerage model. And also I don't have a lot of experience in traditional resale. And so that wasn't the route for me, but I wanted to stay within this new development niche. And, I'm pursuing kind of the parts of this business that I enjoy more. which is more strategic thinking, more early planning, proper research and design development, and understanding the nuances of a project specific, platform and its operations.
So I do want to start off by applauding you that you're focusing on what you love and passionate about, because I meet a lot of people, like I know someone and like his goal is just to move out of the country. I'm like, I get that, but what do you want to do for work? Because you can move out of the country, but then spend 40 hours a week doing something you hate.
Right.
But you're in your country.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So it's like a big component of, especially nowadays when there's so much more work-life balance focus, it's like, okay, focus on what you're passionate about, focus on what you're good at, what you love, all that. So I do want to applaud you on that, because a lot of people don't do that. They tend to just go with the flow.
So, right. And I think that's such a crucial aspect of this business, and anybody in this business. I do feel like the only way to truly succeed is if you are really loving what you're doing, and it's a fickle business where you have big rewards, but also there are periods in your career where it's rough, And so if you aren't loving what you're doing, and if you're not passionate and aspiring to do the next thing, it's hard to stay in this industry.
Yeah, it's hard to stay motivated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, especially in real estate, where you're promised all these riches, all this money. People are watching the shows like, I want to do that. And I'm like, cool. Or like I had a friend of mine years ago, she's like, I'm thinking about doing real estate part-time. I'm like, cool. All right. How much money do you want to make part-time? I don't know, like bring 25 grand a year, just like part-time. I'm like, all right, cool. So I did the numbers, like you have fees and broker splits. I'm like, congrats. You have to sell almost $3 million worth of real estate a year to make like 25 grand, like after taxes, after everything. She's like, oh,
right. Exactly. Exactly.
Right? So, one of the things you mentioned about development is that it's very complicated. One of the reasons why it's been complicated for some of the developers I know is also what you touched on, which is like all the different neighborhoods, right? So Hancock Park has an HPOZ, Historical Preservation Overlay Zone. A lot of neighborhoods have that. Coast, like Pacific Palisades, unfortunately, with the fires, it's like, but you have a coastal commission. So, and every year it changes. So what are some of the changes you've been seeing with some of the developers over, the last, 5-10 years?
I mean, I feel like if we're talking specifically about new development, there isn't a ton of new development in Hancock Park. And when I reference new development, I'm talking about mixed use, high rise or mid rise, but call it more than 20, 50, 100, 200 unit type of buildings. And so if we look at LA, we don't see anything in Hancock Park. I think
but you're right. But like Mid Wilshire, you might see some.
Yeah, I mean it's downtown. It's downtown. Yeah. It's Mid Wilshire. It's West Hollywood. It's Century City. And what has changed? Look, I think that development policy and regulation in LA County, well, quite frankly, in the state of California, has never been easy. And I think given kind of pre-sale requirements, different marketing contingencies that's put on by the state, it does make it harder. I think the thing that has probably changed the most in the last decade is just cost. And so to underwrite call it a 200 unit building and make it affordable for the consumer or end user, while also ensuring that it lines up with the developer's bottom line. I think that's the trickiest part. And it's harder and harder every year. And in the last 16 years, I feel like more developers have probably lost money than made money on these big projects, if you look at it net.
Now, are most of your clients building these mid and high rises for the purpose of selling, like they're condos with retail at the bottom, or are they actually apartments and they're holding on to them? And what kind of strategies have you been seeing?
Yeah, well, most of my experience is mixed use condo buildings or, kind of hospitality oriented condo hotel projects. I recently started working with more multifamily developers, building apartments, but I wouldn't say that's like my specialty. So yes, to answer your question, most of my clients are developers that are looking to sell. And, it's always started with that essentially exit strategy. I mean, what has changed other than the delays and more difficulties? I think the thing that has changed the most in terms of, with overall market is that buyers are way more, I think, aware of what they want, aware of what their lifestyle entails. They're much more, financially savvy, and we have so much information accessible online now, right? And so I think understanding the buyer's demands, what the market needs, and kind of filling in those holes is much more difficult today than it was 10, 15 years ago.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of my clients, a lot of people I'm talking to, they're actually thinking more like long term, right? It used to be, hey, I'm going to live in this place for a couple of years, then move on. Now it's like 10 years, 15 years.
Right.
My wife and I are like, okay, for our next house, it's probably going to be a 20-year house. Right. So to your point, it's like, yeah, I'm seeing kind of the same thing. Buyers are getting pickier as to what they want.
Yeah.
So in these for some of these condos, what are some of the things that the buyers are looking for, and how does your developers kind of react to that?
Well, 90% of my experience is in the luxury segment of the market. And so when we're talking about affluent buyers, most of them being, kind of globally aware or bi-coastal or intercontinental, I think that kind of the service offerings at the building is so much more or just as important as what you get inside your four walls, right? Like security, privacy. We talk about concierge, but concierge is so elevated now, right? And it's so much more than white glove, but it's just kind of constant 24/7 accessibility. Before, 10, 15 years ago, if you have a new glass tower with a pool and a gym, great, you have all of it, right? But today it's like people still want the pool and gym, but like, who cares about that? Like, they want to know if there's a community of like-minded people and potentially social networking opportunities to connect with them. Is there a program for my kids, my pet? Like, do I have access to all of the things that I need from, I don't know, package storage, grocery delivery into my home, like somebody walking my dog, housekeeping. So I think those are the nuanced things that we have to think about. Well, buyers think about and expect, especially in the higher end mixed use product.
Which explains why developers want to sell. They don't want to deal with that. Right? Like I'm hearing this stuff and I'm like, this has got to be a pain to manage.
Yeah.
But it makes total sense, right? And for those listening, and I mention this on like almost every time I'm interviewed or I'm interviewing someone, the reason why we see development on the luxury side is because of the cost to build, right? Like drywall is the same whether you're building in, the Wilshire corridor or you're building in Pacoima. It's the same drywall. It's the same plumbing. You have to make your dollar go farther. And in your case, what you're bringing up is all the extra amenities, because you're right, it's a lifestyle. Yeah. Right? Especially these people are planning to live there longer or bi-coastal or whatever it is. When you mention mixed use, does that also, usually sometimes that includes like just retail, like usually like retail at the bottom. So what have you seen in that, like when they're designing or building, are they trying to like envision what would go there? Or is it, hey, it's a blank slate, let the next tenant figure it out? If that makes sense.
No, well, look, I think developers with proper experience and a real vision come to the table with an idea of the kind of community they want to create, right? So if you have, call it 50,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor and 200 plus condo units above it, it's like the developers that have experience come to the table going, I want to build this for so-and-so end user. And because this is the lifestyle they live, I know that with the retail, I want a staple restaurant, maybe some spa or wellness services, that's kind of in the ideal situation. I have definitely been a part of projects and in the room with developers that have no idea in terms of what, but they're like,
Right.
this is what I can build and I want to maximize. You know, I want to maximize ROI and I want to maximize my buildable square footage. And I don't really care about who goes in. And I think that's where long term more problems occur, and it's a harder product to sell because the entire thing has started without a clear vision of who exactly they're targeting and what the programming is going to look like.
That makes sense, because I remember there's a building, it was a mid-rise in Encino, and like they're building it. It was looking beautiful. It was going to be apartments on top. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of curious to see what the retail is going to be, and it's a bank. And I'm like, that's cool. Everyone needs a bank, but that also feels boring. Like, I want to live above a bank. I want to live above a coffee shop, a restaurant, like even a gym.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know if I'd want to live above that, but I get it. Everyone needs a place to be.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Look, I worked on a project, call it 13 years ago, where the staple tenant on the ground floor was literally Staples, the office supplies store, with 96 condo units above it. And it's like, wow. And, they did that lease because Staples wanted a 10-year lease. And it was like, okay, so you chose to go that way because it was easy. It's a 10-year commitment that you're going to get paid on the thing. And it's Staples, right?
Right.
Instead of cutting up the retail space to get in a coffee shop, to, I don't know, get in a little cafe, get in a nail salon, like things that the actual residents of the building would use on a daily basis. Right? But that's harder. And those kind of businesses, there aren't guarantees like a Staples. So that's the route they chose. But again, like you said, with the bank, I mean, like how often do you go to Staples?
Right.
Like,
if at all. I have a printer at home. Like, I don't know.
You got to go to Staples when that printer runs out of ink.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point, because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You have the nail salon down below. You have 96 units up above. The people upstairs are happy that there's stuff to do. They're going to renew their leases, or they're going to stay in their condos longer. The people downstairs are going to be like, yeah, maybe it's a mom and pop nail salon, but they got 96 clients. They're keeping busy.
Exactly.
There's the name's gonna escape me, and I'm gonna remember it in the middle of the night, and I'm gonna reach out to you because I'm like, here's the name. But it's in downtown LA, and it's an older community of condos, but it is retail at the bottom. And it's like a little market. It's like all these little things. I think there's like a nail salon, office space. And I remember showing it to a client years ago, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. Like, if you wanted to, you didn't have to leave.
Yeah. And I think urban centers like downtown LA, I can't speak much about downtown LA today, but pre-pandemic, that's exactly it. Like, you are living in an urban town center with this lifestyle component accessible right downstairs, between your wine bars and your restaurants and your clothing stores and the coffee shops and, all the cool things that like people actually want and would use and go to on somewhat of a regular basis. Right. And so, yeah. And I think, again, the development kind of arena has shifted so much because, like, I don't know that downtown LA, like, we can really call it a true urban destination anymore.
Right.
And so, yeah, it does get harder. And I think it's really devastating when we see a lot of the retail front empty. So, and we're seeing more of that, obviously more so in different pockets of the city than others. But yeah, it makes it harder.
Now, are you involved in the planning process in terms of, like, before they even start construction? And it's like, hey, here is your target.
Many times, yeah.
Yeah. So where is like the good planning versus poor planning that you've seen when it comes to these types of projects?
The good planning starts when the conversation happens around who is our target demographic. I think that identifying who you are marketing and selling to and catering to and programming and designing and building for those people is where the great projects end up. When you come to the table without thinking about that up front, and you're just literally looking at what's my gross buildable, what are my entitlement bullet points, what can I do, and how much money is it going to take? And then you later figure out, okay, so who's actually going to live here? Like, that's when it gets more difficult.
Sure. So it's almost like you do it backwards.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's with any sort of sales or product planning. Like, you need to understand who your audience is, who your end user is. Are you catering to them? Like, when you're designing a website, are you thinking about UX? Like, what does the user functionality look like? Is it easy? Is it simple? Is it giving them what they need? Are we capturing the audience that is going to spend money on this thing we're offering? Right. So I think it's like that across the board with real estate, especially these bigger projects. Like, that's such a crucial component. And it's shocking to me that so many developers don't think about that until, quite frankly, later.
When it's too late.
I mean, yeah, and it's not necessarily too late, but it's much harder to redo something or try to fix something versus just doing it right from the get-go.
Yeah. It's on the residential side, I've had developers, like one developer I work with, they'll buy, it's called RTI, right? Ready to issue permits. Permits are ready to go. And they still make changes. Because like, hey, they didn't think about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Look, I think when you're buying a house with RTI, that's great. But again, you can have a different approach.
Like vision. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So when you're building kind of these mid and high rises, you mentioned the luxury market, like that's basically who's buying these condos or whatever. I guess walk me through an avatar, who that person would be.
Well, it depends, right? Every building, every neighborhood is different. Like, if we're talking about $1 million condo, in, I don't know, call it West Hollywood, it's one type of buyer versus a $7 million condo in Century City versus, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it is all different.
And it could be that vastly different.
Yeah.
$1 million could be a first time home buyer. So could it $7 million. We've sold a house almost $10 million to a first time home buyer before. It was wild. Really nice guy, but it was wild. But you're right. So have you noticed the higher the price point, like those less likely to be there full time, or they're expecting more of those amenities? As you go up in price or even coming down in price, what have you noticed in terms of major difference when your developer's like, oh, look, this is who I'm ultimately selling to?
Right. Well, again, I think it just depends on neighborhood and product. I think the higher the price point is, the buyer is more financially sophisticated and also much more inclined and aware of what they need, and they probably have more what I would call non-negotiables. I think in the lower price categories, especially when you're dealing with under $1 million product in LA, for example, which is a rarity in the city of LA. It is a different kind of buyer, and I wouldn't say that they're necessarily easier, but they understand that with that budget in the market, there's only so much you can get. So I think the expectations are much more manageable and realistic. And, I feel like at that price category, every buyer has to make some sort of compromise. And I think that is something that people are aware of, consumers in the market are aware of. The higher the price, I really do think it is an elevated level of service and security. Like, that's kind of the most important thing right now.
So as a developer, wouldn't I want to build more affordable units? Wouldn't they in theory sell faster? If I'm trying to get in and out as quickly as possible, like why would a developer want?
It depends. It depends on what your business model is and what sort of developer you are. It depends on which neighborhood and, really who you're catering to, because you can't really build, call it 200 more affordable condos in Beverly Hills. Like, that just doesn't make sense. The numbers won't pencil. And I think the interesting thing about LA is, I think it's hard to have a building where you can get something for $700,000 and then have a product available at $25 million. or call it 20 million, because the buyer archetype is so different that it's really hard to be able to cater to both of those people within the same community. And so it just doesn't exist. And not to, I don't know, not to like shit on anyone or anything, but $25 million buyers don't want to be in a building with $700,000 buyers.
You're 100% right. Yeah. No, and to your point, it's like, it's not bad or indifferent. It's just, like you said, a lot of them are networking. I've noticed as you get, we'll call it higher up in the ranks, like who matters, who you associate yourself with, who you network with. So yeah, if you're in these high rises where the average price point's 7 million plus, it's like, those are the type of people I want to be around because I might use them for business or whatever. But these other people, it's like, okay, that's just a different world.
Yeah. Look, I mean, in the higher price category, I don't think that networking is a high priority, to be honest.
Okay.
But I think it is this subconscious desire of wanting to be with like-minded people kind of within their own, I don't know, social class. I hate saying that, but yeah, like truly, that is the reality of it. Yeah.
That makes sense. So if someone wanted to get into development, I mean, I get people reaching out like, oh yeah, I aspire to be a developer. I aspire to do this. Like, where would they get started?
I mean,
or should they get started with talking to you?
What kind of developer?
Well, let's say they wanted to get into developing these mid and high rises, but they kind of wanted to get started, or they just don't even know where to begin. How would you guide someone and say, hey, look, this is where beginning steps? Obviously, it's a long journey. These developers didn't start off with developing right away, I would imagine.
Well, if somebody came to me and said, I want to develop a building in Los Angeles, I would say, I really think you should reconsider.
That's fair. Why should they reconsider?
Because I think it's much harder than people think. And I think that between cost and long-term liability, there's a lot more nuances to take into consideration. And unless you really know what you're doing, it's not an easy landscape to break into as a first timer. I think on a more serious note, if somebody wants to get into the business, I would say like, you got to somehow get your feet wet and go work for a real developer and understand, and really experience hands-on, like the different components and nuances of how it works in the process. And when I say go mentor a developer, I don't mean go mentor somebody who's flipping houses. Like, that's not a real developer, right? And so I think especially in today's landscape, we have more institutional, I guess, developers, but institutional money guys that are in real estate that are doing this, unless there is a proper management team with real experience. That's where these projects become complete financial, mechanically driven things. And so even if, I guess my point to that is, even with access to a lot of money, if you don't have the real experience, it can still be a shit show.
Yeah, it was interesting. I see a lot of, because I'm active in like different like investment forums and things like that, and there's a lot of people who want to get into real estate. And like, I'm thinking about becoming a real estate agent so I can get like really involved in the development and stuff. What do you guys think? And of course, there's a lot of people like, oh yeah, of course, and then of course, join my team. Because that's really what they're doing. I'm one of the few that say, actually, you should consider becoming a project manager.
Exactly.
It's like that way you understand construction, you understand how much it costs. And to be honest, it actually pays really well. Like, there's a big demand from what I'm hearing from project managers in the development world. Like, developers are paying big money for it because they know that if you know how to navigate the city, and you know how to keep things as close to budget as possible, then you'll go really far and you'll learn a lot in the process.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a very different landscape with aspiring developers that want to build one house or a duplex or triplex versus a 20 unit building versus a 200 unit building. And I think especially in the city of LA, like, you need to have the right team of expediters and attorneys and a bunch of stuff that I think doesn't come into your mind up front when you think about residential development.
Right.
But there's a lot of those kind of technical logistics that need to be considered and aware of, and you have to know who to go to and where to go, and really build a foundational team that can take a developer through the technical details before you can actually put a shovel in the ground.
Yeah. And you also have to factor in like time. For some of
Right.
these projects, that you may have worked on, how long has the whole project taken from start to finish? I mean, it's obviously years, but is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 6 months? Which we all know it's not, but
I've been involved with projects that have taken 8 to 10 years. Yeah.
and it's like you have carrying costs, opportunity costs.
Exactly. And when a project if a deal is underwritten 10 years ago, your numbers are going to be way off today.
I've heard of that.
And nobody underwrites a 10-year deal, right? Because everybody thinks they're going to build it in 2 years. And they put in a contingency for like 4 months, a 4-month delay. But, the city of LA is a hard place to build anything. And so depending on what you're building, I would say whatever you think your timeline is, times that by 2 or 2.5.
Sure. Yeah, I remember years ago, my first job out of college was buying foreclosures at the courthouse steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd help them flip the houses and stuff. And I just remember seeing on all the contractors' bids, like, hey, this bid's good for, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Now it seems like, yeah, this bid's good for like a week. Mm-hmm. Because we just can't control our costs.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting really difficult to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So with your organization, kind of walk us through your involvement from
with my company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting.
Well, it depends. So majority of my clients are developers, whether family office or institutional. More recently, I have more project involvement now where I'm coming in the middle of a sales program and re-strategizing, reshifting, repositioning because the market has changed so much. The ideal projects and the projects that I do love most is when I get involved early on and I'm working with the initial development team, research and planning team to really talk about who the avatars are and building for them. I would say I'm more like I'm the person in the room that's always reminding you, like, don't forget the end game is to sell this to an actual person that wants to give you money. And I'm also a connector of things and groups and people. So when I get brought into a project early and we're looking for a research analyst or we're looking for an interior designer or we're looking for a contractor, I work with the development team to essentially introduce the right players and partners in so we can build a solid team to move things forward. But, like I said, I can come in at any stage of a project. The re-strategizing and coming in the middle of something has its perks because it's like, okay, you actually have a thing, right? I have a physical building I can look at and walk in and people can experience versus like we're just looking at this parking lot and I have to imagine what it's going to be in 8 years,
Yeah.
But with the repositioning and stuff, it is harder to try to fix something or redo something when we're halfway through.
Yeah, which makes sense. Because for those that have been working on the 10-year project, interest rates weren't what they are today. Mm-hmm. They may not have factored those things in.
Right.
So how do you reposition? If a property, you have this property with all these condos on the market today, and they're not selling, or they were about to put on the market, but we didn't quite anticipate certain things.
Well, fortunately, with the luxury product,
they don't matter as much.
Yeah, the interest rates don't really move the needle much for these buyers.
Right.
It is like I want to say the condos that are anywhere from $1 million to call it $2 million that really get hit the hardest because 80% of the time those buyers are getting financing. When something like that, the real strategy is understanding where the buyer is coming from and recognizing, where can we compromise or meet them without losing too much money. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if it's a financial thing, like there's no tricks and gimmicks around that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I was talking to someone recently. They own a property in Malibu. It's still standing. It's a condo and a condo complex. And so we're talking, it's like, well, with all the fires and everything, is that really going to be a problem? I was like, look, I'll buy it for $1. Right. Like, you know what I mean? Someone's going to pick it up. It's just a matter of if the numbers make sense for them. Like you said, a lot of these people are more financially savvy. You're right. People at the higher price points, they actually almost don't even care what the interest rate is because their money's stuck in investments that are giving a better return anyways. So like as long as the investments are beating the returns on the mortgage, they're going to leverage where they think it makes sense.
Yeah,
or just pay cash.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, some just want to park their money. So it's like, yeah, I get it. So at that point, it's just like, could a developer, if you're in mid-project, be like, okay, you're missing these amenities if you're trying to get this price point. So therefore, the developer could put in some of those amenities if necessary. Like, hey, you don't have any sort of dog walking service. Let's partner you up with a dog walking company that can come in and that can be part of that service.
In terms of repositioning, yeah, I mean, those things are taken into consideration for sure. It's definitely, I think the key to repositioning is understanding how the market has changed and understanding if the end user or your target demo has changed. And if so, how and who has it changed to, and how do we need to accommodate them and filling in the gaps? And sometimes it's just a matter of telling this story in a different way. Some of these projects are very, call it community centric, while others are more lifestyle centric, while others are just about how great our design and interiors are. So it's really understanding, who you're talking to and what kind of story resonates the most, right? And sometimes when you're creating a new story, it's just about new visuals and new photography, new video, new artwork, whatever. And those are kind of, I would say, the easiest ways, right? Just retelling a story. When you are kind of looking at a bigger thing, that's when it becomes trickier. But again, nowadays I feel like a lot of the service amenities offered in different buildings are outsourced, right? And so you can establish partnerships, so it doesn't become additional operational costs for the HOA, which is always what people want. Like, you can have a really great dog walking and grooming service, but if you don't have a dog, like, I don't want to pay for that, right? But if I do have a dog, happy to pay the extra whatever, $100 a month to opt in for that service.
Right, because even for them, could be actually cheaper than hiring their own dog walking service.
Exactly.
Not that people at that price point really care as much. Kind of like solar panels. I've had clients like, oh, that's such a great thing, and all homes should have it. It's like, but I'm like, it doesn't really add much value. Like, why not? I'm like, if someone can afford a $5 million home, do you think they really care about their utility bills? It's just
maybe they care about saving the planet.
They do, right? So, but to your point, it's a different story, right? It's like, this isn't about saving money. It's about convenience. It's about whatever. You have to change the story. Have you noticed, because you mentioned changing the story, it could be lifestyle, it could be convenience. Have you noticed certain neighborhoods lean towards one versus the other? Like you mentioned, so it's like, hey, these neighborhoods, they tend to focus more on community aspects, right? The lunches. This one's more like, no, it's the lifestyle. Have you noticed any sort of nuances between neighborhoods?
Well, I think the most obvious is, we look at a neighborhood like West Hollywood, right? And it is about accessibility and convenience, being able to not get in your car to go anywhere, do anything you want to do.
Right.
And then we look at neighborhoods like, call it Beverly Hills. I think the story around privacy and security is most important. And then you look at places like downtown, and I don't really know what that story is today, but there was a point in time where it was like, I'm a part of this new hip, like very progressively evolving community of trendy entrepreneurs, young professionals, artists, creatives, that kind of community. So it just depends.
Yeah. There was a condo community in actually the arts district. And I remember I was showing a client a property there, and the realtor happened to also be the HOA president. And he was saying, he's like, yeah, we're very community focused here, actually. It's like we have the movie nights for the kids. We have all these things,
Right.
to keep people engaged. And then they tend to
Mhm.
stay longer, which for resale, people like.
Mhm.
Like I've sold a lot of condos over the years, and people ask me, like, hey, what's the average length that people stay here? I'm like, oh, yeah, well, these people have been here for 20 years. These people have been here for, 5 years. And like, oh, wow. They actually, like, it resonates really well with them.
Mhm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, and then I know sometimes you also work with realtors, right? Because development for realtors is somewhat of a gold deal, right? I know a realtor on the residential side, and that's like all he does is development,
Mhm.
right? So, how does a realtor break into this particular market? Because it's very unique and is what it is.
Right. Well, the newest part of my business is
Yeah.
working with real estate agents and real estate professionals in new development. I have a really great online program that I've
Yeah.
called The Complete Guide to Real Estate Development Marketing and Sales. I would love for you to check it out and love to get your feedback. But,
Absolutely.
overall, I think if any real estate agent wants to get their feet wet in the new development landscape, first and foremost, like, you have to understand the new development inventory in the market. And so,
Hmm.
like, if you're an agent servicing the greater Los Angeles area, I would say go into every single new project sales center, make an appointment with the sales director, and get a tour of the building. And learn to start understanding like how each project is different, why their price points are where they are, why certain projects have a certain set of services and amenities while others don't. Understand how a $3,600 a month HOA is justified versus a $700 a month HOA. And so I would say first and foremost is that. And then there's like the technical parts of new development. You're working on a different contract, there's different contingencies, there's different stipulations. So it's like that's kind of the not so fun part, unless you're into that.
Right.
And so I think it's being conscious and aware and knowing that if you represent a buyer and you take them to a new development building and you submit an offer to the listing agent on an RPA and they say, okay, Rick, thank you for your offer. We don't work off of an RPA, but let me get you with whatever their initial offering system or process is, and then they hand you a 200-page developer's contract. Like, know that that's normal.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that is normal. And I've been in situations where I've worked with agents and they're like, we're not signing this, and I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, well then you can't buy here. Like, it's a contract that's approved by the Department of Real Estate, and there's just no way around it. Like, if there are red line items, like, we can add an addendum to address some of those things if seller agrees. But like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, we can't sign an RPA.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I haven't had the chance to go down that rabbit hole because it could be. I mean, 200-page contract, you're going to want to read hopefully all of it or a good chunk of it. So yeah, it's got to be a different world. I mean, you see it just even between different states. Yeah, I own properties in other states, and the way they run things is very
Oh
different.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
One of the biggest challenges I had to grasp with is in other states, the contingencies are automatically released.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh crap, I have to make a
Yeah,
decision or I have
yeah,
to make a move.
yeah,
Otherwise, I'm screwed. I'm forced to buy it.
yeah. Passive contingency removals are very standard. So
Are they in the
yeah,
in
in
your world?
development,
Okay, well
yeah,
there you go.
yeah,
Right. So it's like you're really pressed for time.
yeah. I mean, look, if you need an extension, you
You
submit
can
the request for extension in writing. But
sure.
if your contingency removal is today at noon and it's 8 minutes from now, like, it's going to be removed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Congrats, you're buying it, like
Yeah.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it makes sense. Even on the contingency part, like part of it, I like if you're a seller, that's perfect.
Hmm.
On the
Yeah.
buy side, especially when you're relying on other people for information, and if they're
Hmm.
dragging their feet,
Hmm. For
that's where
sure.
the challenge is.
For sure. Look, and I think there are so many great tools available today. So, and I'm not saying that everybody should do this, but use
Right.
it as a starting point. Like, if you are dealing with a developer's contract and you're seeing it for the first time, throw that document into ChatGPT with the RPA and have it summarize the different points and,
There you go.
start from there.
Yeah.
But look, I do recommend every real estate agent read a contract and ask questions if you don't know what it's talking about. But I know that a lot of agents do not. So,
why do you think that is? I have my theories.
oh my God, I don't even want to start that conversation.
I'll start. It's because a lot of them have egos and they don't want to ask. They might feel like it's a dumb question or that they don't know what they're doing. But if you don't ask and something goes south, you're still on the hook, whether you knew about it or not.
Oh, so you're saying why don't they ask questions?
Yeah, but to your point, it's like they have a 200-page document. Most don't read. We see it on the residential side all the time. Agents are like, well, I didn't know this and this. I'm like, you signed off on it, dude. How do you not? But I would imagine in your world, if they're new to it, it's a lot.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with the ego component. I think the other piece to that is that a lot of agents are lazy. And I hate saying that because I know so many agents that are, quite frankly, the very opposite of lazy and amazing
for sure.
And meticulous, right? But there's a lot of agents that are lazy and it is what it is. So it's like they don't ask the questions because they haven't even read the contract. They don't know what questions to ask. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think Inman just came out with a report, like something like 70% of agents didn't do a single deal last year. Was some wildly high number, and I'm also like not surprised.
I think it was closer to 80%.
Was it? Yeah. It's just, it is what it is, right? I think that it's a low barrier to entry to becoming a real estate agent, right? It's like people are like, oh, what courses should I take? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Most of the stuff on the exam you don't even use. Like, pay the $150 to do the crash course.
Right.
Then when I got my broker's license, which is almost the same thing as a regular license, just longer, I didn't do the crash course. I'm like, I know everything. Took the exam. It was all lender questions. I'm like, but I'm applying for my broker's license, not my lending license.
Right. Well, like, why would the state not actually prepare a course and an exam that has practical information and usable information that like we need on a regular basis? Like, it's wild to me.
I agree. So here's what I would do. If I was a DRE, I'd have sub-licenses, right? So for example, I technically can sell a mobile home. To this day, I've never sold a mobile home. So I'm really not the best person for it. I could learn it. So it's like, okay, or like commercial, right? If you do more commercial, it's still a residential exam. So it's like, look, here's a general real estate exam to get your license. And then you have subcategories. Right. So now people can specialize in different categories. The DRE makes more money because it's more exams. And then we have actually more experts in the space.
Right. 100%. I agree with you. Look, I mean, I have friends that come to me all the time saying, Hana, I want to sell my house. Can you help me? And I'm like, I don't know how to sell a house. I mean, I could probably figure it out if I wanted to, but like, it's not what I do. I don't want to. I'm happy to refer you to somebody,
Right. Yeah. It's very true. It's like, there's certain things that would check off. Like I had to sell a property in a different market. So I was interviewing agents, but it was in a condo complex. And I remember calling the HOA president and he's like, oh, by the way, I'm a realtor. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, of course you are. Like, why not? But then I was like, for me, the HOA president would be the last person I want to sell my condo.
Oh my God, 100%.
Right? Yeah. Like people are like, oh no, they have more knowledge. I'm like, that's exactly why I don't want them.
Yeah.
As a buying agent, sure.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's like, if there's talks of a special assessment, but it's not in the minutes, then there's nothing to disclose. When you sell a property, like ignorance is so bliss.
Rick, you're not supposed to say that out loud.
I know, but it's true. Look, you disclose what you factually know, right? Like I've always told my clients, like, well, hey, this is what I have knowledge of, or this is what I might be sure. It's like, look, it's all about fact. Like, what do you factually know? That's what we have to disclose, and let's disclose it. Let's not hide anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because in other states, there's like no disclosures. When I bought properties, like I was in an escrow on a property last year on a fourplex out of state, and they had just bought it a few months ago. and they're trying to sell for this ridiculously high price. I'm like, well, what improvements did they make? Oh, they just painted it. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. We entered escrow and there was termite damage. Not a big deal, 750
Uh-huh.
bucks. But then all the floor joists were shot.
Oh
And I'm
God.
like, they probably painted because they probably saw cracks.
Mm,
But it's like they didn't have to disclose any of this,
yeah.
assuming they knew or not know. It's just like, ugh,
Yeah.
bothers me
Yeah.
because like I wasted so much time. But either way, here in California, it's very much a disclosure state. There's tons of stuff you have to disclose if you have like factual knowledge. So
Right.
a little bit of a tangent, but hey, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted to promote? I really love this talk. I really appreciate it.
No, no, thank you. Look, I've enjoyed this talk. I think that, I guess, closing remarks, I think real estate is such a fascinating industry, and it's a great business for those that are okay with challenging themselves and wanting to aspire to do better and be better every day. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. And I always say, I think for real estate professionals, like you always have to think about how to expand your business and your revenue funnels. Because, like I said, when things get tough and you're just relying on your commission from the next deal and deals aren't happening, like
Right.
you got to look at different ways to grow your business and expand your revenue. It's the only way to stay in this business long term.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
People try to ride the wave of 2020, 2021, and they're like, oh yeah, this is good. Like if you didn't do well in 2021, we have like problems. Like
Right.
I don't know a
Right.
single agent that didn't do well in 2021. It was like, it was
Right.
my best year by like far.
Yeah.
And it has slowed down. Like I've been grateful. Last year I did very well, even with having a kid, right? So like I took
Congratulations.
thank you. She just turned one. It is
Oh,
wild.
exciting.
Just turned one. So, but it's like, yeah, you're right. Like you have to figure out who your target is, right? Who is your target demographic of clients, and how do you get to them, and how do you position yourself to be an expert in that space?
Mm-hmm.
Is really what I've noticed. I've noticed a lot of the agents that I'm friends with or just seen when they're just like there's nothing special. They're just not doing enough business.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, and going back to the beginning of our conversation, like you have to love what you're doing and you have to be passionate about what your day to day looks like.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, and never burn bridges, because this is a very small and insanely incestual industry, and like you just never know.
It is wild. You're 100% right. They actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Top Agent Network.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're members of that, and you can only be part of it if you're part of the verified top 10% of producing agents. And I remember having lunch with his name is David Feldman. He's the founder of the company,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, no, we did the study. It's like 90% of the business is done by 10% of the agents.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Yeah, which is also wild because most of my deals, I've only worked with agents once because there's so many agents out there that are only doing the 1 to 5 deals a year.
I actually, Rick, I think it's like 5% of the agents do 90% of the business, and only 1%, especially in the luxury segment, like the north of 10 million, 1% of the agents do the north of $10 million business.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because people have asked me like, oh, what neighborhood do you farm or this, that, and the other. Like, I only know honestly of like one agent that kills it with farming. Otherwise, I'm noticing it's more about price point. Like the agents, like their niche or their categories are more about price point. Like an agent doing a $10 million list, like I would love to take on a $10 million listing. On the development side, we've sold homes in that price point, but I also don't necessarily expect to get a lot of business from it. Right. And I know I'm probably shooting myself in the foot. Someone's like, I'm going to hire Rick. And then they listen to this. I'm like, just kidding. I will gladly take the listing and I will knock it out of the park for you. I swear. I'll work my tail off. But it is a different, like these price points are the different worlds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Like there's a top producing agent. He lives in Venice, but he does deals like his average price point is like 20 million. Like that's just, it's those worlds, the Beverly Hills, Hollywood Hills, stuff like that. So,
you'd be surprised. There's some $20 million things in Venice.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
For those like I mean, Venice, it's such a niche. I remember showing years ago when I first got started, I showed a home in Venice. It was like going for 1.6 million. And it was like a postage stamp of a lot because that's how a lot of Venice is. And my client's like, I'm paying 1.6 million for a 4,000 square foot lot. And I'm like, yeah. Like, yeah, pass.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, yeah, I'm going somewhere. We ended up buying in like Bel Air. It just worked out better. And it's such a lifestyle thing over by the beach.
Yeah, like whatever it is that you decide is your niche, whether it's a price category or a neighborhood or a product type or a specific buyer or seller type, like pick your thing and become the greatest at it.
Yeah, I agree. I do a lot of investment, so I get a lot of clients who, like on the buy side, I get actually a lot of house hackers. So people who buy and rent by the room or rent out of their units. But you're right, there isn't, people come to me specifically for that. And they're willing to spend the time and money and all that. So no, I appreciate it. So thank you so much for this. How can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on social media at the Hana Collective.com is the website. Let me say that again. You can find me on social media at the Hana Collective. Or you can go to my website, thehanacollective.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for this. Maybe we'll have you on later on. We can get updates on what developers are doing now that, we're getting into our new normal, and then we'll go from there.
I love it. Yeah, I'd love to be back on.
There you go. We'll grab coffee.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for tuning in to The Key to the City of Angels. I hope you found today's episode helpful as you navigate the world of Los Angeles real estate. Whether you're looking to buy your first home, expand your investment portfolio, or sell in this competitive market, I'm here to help you succeed. Let's connect. Visit my website or follow me on social media to learn more about how I can help you achieve your real estate goals. And if you're ready to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to work with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit. Together, let's unlock your potential and make your real estate dreams a reality.